Camilla woke up with a heavy chest, her eyes fixed on the stained ceiling of the small apartment she shared with Ryan. The faint morning light slipped through the broken blinds, casting pale lines on the wall. She felt empty. It was a morning like any other, but inside something was different. Something was about to change. The mattress sagged beside her where Ryan lay sleeping. The sound of his breathing was uneven, laced with the sour scent of last night's alcohol. The memory of his yelling still vibrated in the air. Camilla's eyes wandered around the room, the dresser with its drawers out of place, shards of glass scattered on the floor, the marks of hands on her own arm. It was all part of the nightmare her life had become. Her phone vibrated under the pillow. She slid a trembling hand toward it and saw a message from her childhood friend, Lisa. "If you need me, you know where to find me." Simple words, but they echoed deep inside her. Camilla pressed the phone against her chest and took a deep breath. She knew she couldn't keep living like this, but how could she escape? How could she leave behind a man who claimed to love her, yet broke her a little more every day? The bathroom door creaked as she pushed it open. The cracked mirror reflected a face she barely recognized. Dark circles, trembling lips, skin marked by the night before. The slap, the shove. Ryan's voice filled with rage and broken promises. "This isn't love," she whispered to herself. She closed her eyes, feeling her heart pounding in her chest. There was a limit to everything, and hers had arrived. In the bedroom, Ryan stirred. Camilla held her breath. "Camilla," his voice was slurred. "Come here." Fear ran down her spine, but this time something inside her refused to obey. She could no longer be a prisoner of this life. Camilla's fingers tightened around her phone. She knew she had to move, had to do something before Ryan fully woke up. Her heartbeat pounded in her ears as she tiptoed across the room. Every step felt like walking on broken glass, each movement deliberate, calculated. The last time she tried to leave, he had found her. He had promised things would change, and for a while they had. Until they hadn't. Her sneakers were by the door. She grabbed them, holding her breath as she crouched. One shoe in her hand, the other. "Where the hell are you going?" Ryan's voice shattered the silence, thick with sleep but laced with suspicion. Camilla froze. Her body tensed as she slowly turned to face him. He was sitting up now, rubbing his face, his eyes narrowing as they landed on the shoes in her hands. "Nowhere. I was just what? Huh? You sneaking out again?" She swallowed hard. A lump formed in her throat, but she forced herself to stand tall. "I need to get some air." Ryan swung his legs off the bed and leaned forward, elbows on his knees, studying her. The silence stretched between them, suffocating. "You think I'm stupid?" Camilla shook her head, stepping back. "No, Ryan, He stood up so fast that she flinched. "After everything I've done for you? You ungrateful little—" Her body reacted before her mind could catch up. She turned and ran. The hallway was too short. The apartment was too small. Ryan was fast, but fear made her faster. She reached the door and yanked it open, just as his fingers brushed her arm. The cold morning air hit her face as she bolted down the stairs, ignoring his shouts from above. Her heart pounded as she sprinted down the block. She didn't stop, didn't look back. Lisa. Her fingers fumbled to dial the number. The call rang once, twice. "Hello?" Lisa's voice groggy from sleep. Camilla gasped for breath. I need you. No hesitation. Where are you? She turned the corner, feet aching, lungs burning. But for the first time in years, she felt something else. Freedom. Camilla sat in the passenger seat of Lisa's car, her hands shaking as she wrapped them around a steaming cup of coffee. The smell was comforting, familiar, something normal in the midst of the chaos that had been her morning. The small diner they had stopped at was mostly empty, the hum of a radio playing in the background. It should have felt safe, but all she could feel was exhaustion and the lingering fear that Ryan would find her. Lisa watched her from across the table, her brows furrowed with concern. How bad was it this time? Camilla let out a shaky breath, staring at the dark liquid in her cup. Bad enough. Lisa exhaled sharply and leaned forward. You can't go back, Cam. Not this time. Camilla nodded, though a small voice inside her whispered doubts. She had left before. Always ended up back in that suffocating apartment. Always ended up believing his apologies, his empty promises. I know, she said softly, though the weight of the past years pressed down on her chest. Lisa reached across the table, squeezing her hand. You have somewhere to stay. I don't care how long you need. Tears welled in Camilla's eyes. She didn't deserve a friend like Lisa, someone who had never given up on her, even when she had given up on herself. Lisa leaned back, crossing her arms. Have you thought about calling the cops? Camilla's stomach twisted. And say what? That my boyfriend yells at me? That sometimes she couldn't finish the sentence. The bruises on her arms spoke for themselves. Lisa's jaw tightened. You could get a restraining order. Camilla scoffed, bitterness creeping into her voice. You think a piece of paper is going to stop him? Lisa didn't argue. They both knew how these stories usually ended. Silence stretched between them. Camilla's fingers traced the rim of her cup. I don't know how to start over, she admitted. Lisa gave her a soft smile. You don't have to do it alone. Camilla let out a slow breath. For the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, she didn't. The guest room in Lisa's apartment was small but warm, a stark contrast to the cold, hollow feeling that had lived inside Camilla for so long. She sat on the bed, staring at her duffel bag, the only thing she had managed to grab before escaping. A whole life reduced to a single bag. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. Ryan. The name on the screen sent a chill down her spine. She hesitated. Then, with trembling hands, she turned the phone over. Face down. She wouldn't answer. Not this time. A soft knock on the door pulled her from her thoughts. Hey, Lisa peeked in. You okay? Camilla nodded, though she wasn't sure it was true. Lisa stepped inside, holding a plate. I made pasta. You should eat. Camilla wanted to say she wasn't hungry, that her stomach was tied in knots, but Lisa gave her a look that left no room for argument. They sat at the small kitchen table, forks scraping against ceramic. Lisa chatted about work, about her annoying coworker, about the new coffee shop that had opened down the street. She was trying to make things feel normal, and for that Camilla was grateful. Halfway through dinner, Lisa put her fork down. What's your plan? Camilla sighed, pushing her food around her plate. I don't know yet. Lisa hesitated before speaking again. I might know someone who can help. A lawyer. Camilla's stomach clenched. Lisa, I'm not ready to just talk to him. Lisa interrupted gently. No pressure. But if you ever decide to take action, it's better to be prepared. Camilla swallowed hard. She hated feeling like a victim, like someone who needed saving. Lisa must have sensed her hesitation. Look, I know you're strong. You always have been. But strength isn't just surviving. Cam, it's knowing when to fight back. Camilla let the words sink in. For so long, surviving had been her only goal. Maybe it was time to do more than just survive. Maybe it was time to take her life back. The following morning, Camilla woke up to sunlight streaming through the window. For the first time in years, she wasn't waking up to the sound of Ryan slamming doors, muttering under his breath, or demanding explanations for things she hadn't done. It felt strange. She stretched under the soft blanket Lisa had given her and let herself breathe. I am safe. It was a thought she wasn't used to, but she clung to it. Lisa was already in the kitchen, sipping coffee, when Camilla stepped out of the guest room. Morning, Lisa greeted with a smile. Morning. Lisa eyed her carefully. You look better. Camilla let out a small, surprised laugh. I feel different. Lisa gestured toward the coffee pot. Help yourself. Oh, and don't freak out, but I gave my lawyer friend a heads up. If you decide to talk to him, he's available. No pressure. Camilla's stomach twisted, but she nodded. Okay. Lisa didn't push further, and they settled into a comfortable silence. Then Camilla's phone buzzed. Her body tensed. Lisa looked at her. Waiting. Camilla hesitated before checking the screen. Ryan. Again. She inhaled sharply. Lisa leaned forward. Block him. Camilla's fingers hovered over the screen. She wanted to. She really did, but something held her back. What if he comes looking for me? Lisa's expression darkened. That's why you need to talk to the lawyer. Camilla chewed her lip. Then, finally, she pressed the block button. A small, final click. Lisa smiled proudly. That's my girl. Camilla let out a breath. It was a small step. But for the first time in a long time, she felt like she was moving forward. The lawyer's office was in a modest brick building downtown. It wasn't the intimidating, high-rise corporate firm Camilla had imagined, and that made her feel slightly more at ease. Lisa walked beside her, offering silent support as they entered. The receptionist, a kind-looking older woman, led them to a small office where a man in his early 40s stood to greet them. Camilla, I'm Daniel Carter. It's nice to meet you. He had a calm, steady presence, something Camilla wasn't used to in men. She shook his hand, her palms slightly sweaty. Nice to meet you, too. Lisa gave her an encouraging nod before sitting down beside her. Daniel settled into his chair, his eyes gentle but focused. Lisa gave me a little bit of background, but I'd like to hear from you. Tell me whatever you're comfortable sharing. Camilla hesitated. Even saying Ryan's name felt like stepping onto dangerous ground, but she had come this far. She took a deep breath. I was in a relationship for 8 years. It started fine. I guess he was charming, attentive, but then things changed. She glanced at Lisa, who gave her a reassuring look. He controlled everything, what I wore, who I talked to, where I went. He isolated me from my friends, made me believe I was the problem. Daniel nodded, not interrupting. Camilla's hands clenched into fists in her lap. And then it got worse. The insults. The threats, the times her throat tightened. She couldn't say it. Daniel leaned forward slightly, his voice firm but kind. You don't have to say everything now, but if you decide to take legal action, we can help you get a restraining order. Maybe even press charges. Camilla's heart pounded. A restraining order? It would legally prevent him from coming near you. If he violates it, he can be arrested. Arrested. The idea of Ryan in handcuffs felt foreign, impossible. I don't know, she admitted. I don't know if I'm ready for that, Daniel nodded. That's okay. You don't have to decide today, but I want you to know you have options. Camilla swallowed hard. For years she had felt trapped, like there was no way out. But now, sitting in this small office, hearing Daniel list actual solutions, she realized something. She wasn't as powerless as she thought. Camilla walked out of the lawyer's office feeling both exhausted and strangely light. It was as if she had been carrying a weight for so long that she had forgotten what it was like to breathe freely. Lisa squeezed her shoulder as they stepped onto the sidewalk. You did good in there. Camilla exhaled slowly, watching the cars pass by. I don't know if I'm ready to do all this. A restraining order, legal action. It feels like I'm poking a bear. Lisa nodded, understanding. I get it. But at least now you know you're not alone in this. For years, Camilla had felt like no one could help her, that Ryan had all the power. But now there was Lisa. There was Daniel. There were people who cared. They decided to stop for lunch at a small diner nearby. The place had red vinyl booths and smelled of fresh coffee. As they settled in, Lisa tapped the menu absent-mindedly. You know, I've been thinking. Camilla looked up. About what? Lisa grinned. You need to get back into the world. Do something for yourself. Something that reminds you of who you are. Camilla raised an eyebrow. Like what? Lisa took a sip of her iced tea. I don't know. When was the last time you did something just for fun? Camilla hesitated. Fun? The concept felt foreign. Lisa's eyes twinkled. What about dance? Camilla nearly choked on her water. Dance? Yeah. You used to love it, right? Camilla blinked. She had. A long time ago. Before Ryan. Before she learned to shrink herself to fit into his expectations. She had loved music, movement, the feeling of being free in her own body. Lisa leaned forward. There's a dance studio a few blocks from here. I checked. They have a beginner's class tomorrow night. Camilla bit her lip. I don't know, Lisa. Lisa rolled her eyes playfully. You don't have to decide right now. Just think about it. Camilla nodded, but the idea lingered. That night, as she lay in bed, Camilla scrolled through her phone. Her finger hovered over the blocked messages. Had Ryan tried to contact her again? She had no way of knowing. And for the first time, she didn't want to know. Instead, she searched for the dance studio Lisa had mentioned. There it was. A simple website, class schedule, photos of people smiling, moving, laughing. She had spent years being told who she was. Maybe it was time to remember for herself. Maybe it was time to dance again. The next evening, Camilla stood in front of the dance studio, her heart pounding in her chest. She hadn't danced in years, and the thought of stepping into a room full of strangers, letting go of everything she had kept buried for so long, terrified her. But she had made a promise to herself. This was for her. The music from inside the studio leaked out into the street, a steady rhythm that seemed to pulse with life. She took a deep breath and pushed open the door. The moment she stepped inside, the warmth of the room wrapped around her. There were about 10 people in the class, all ranging in age and skill, moving their bodies to the music with abandon. The instructor, a woman in her early 30s with an infectious smile, greeted her warmly. "Welcome." "First time?" Camilla nodded, feeling a bit out of place. "Yeah, no worries, you'll be fine. We're all here to have fun." The instructor directed her to a spot near the back of the room, and as the class began, Camilla felt her nerves slowly start to fade. The movements were simple, basic steps, easy to follow, but for the first time in a long time, Camilla wasn't thinking about her past or the scars left behind by Ryan. She wasn't worried about what came next or whether she was doing it right. All that mattered was the beat, the movement, the freedom of it. The rhythm seemed to fill her, sweeping away the last remnants of the heaviness that had been weighing her down. She smiled, a small, genuine smile that felt unfamiliar, but right. She lost herself in the music. When the class ended, Camilla was breathless but alive, smiling with a lightness she hadn't felt in years. She stayed afterward to chat with the instructor, whose name was Natalie. "You did great. You should come back next week." Camilla smiled shyly. "I think I will." And for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel like an outsider in her own life. The following days were a blur of dance classes, walks in the park, and long conversations with Lisa. Camilla was rediscovering pieces of herself she had forgotten. But there was still something missing. It wasn't until one Saturday afternoon, when Lisa dragged her to a coffee shop for an impromptu meeting with a friend of hers, that Camilla would learn that missing piece. Lisa's friend, Marco, was an easygoing guy with a quick smile and a natural charm. He worked as a graphic designer, and though he was polite and engaging, Camilla couldn't shake the feeling of unease as the conversation continued. At first, she thought it was just nerves, but as the conversation wore on, it became clear. Marco wasn't just friendly, there was something more. He looked at her with a softness, a kind of understanding that made Camilla feel seen in a way she hadn't been in a long time. They talked about everything from art to travel to the books they'd read recently. For the first time in years, Camilla found herself laughing and connecting with someone, not out of obligation or expectation, but out of mutual interest and respect. By the end of their coffee, she realized something startling. She was enjoying herself. It had been 3 weeks since Camilla started taking dance classes, and with each session, she felt herself growing stronger, more confident. There was an ease to her movements now, a natural flow that she hadn't expected. But there was more to her transformation than just dance. She had begun to rediscover pieces of herself, small, quiet parts that had once been buried by the weight of her past. And then there was Marco. After their coffee, Camilla found herself thinking about him more than she'd ever expected. Not in the way she had thought about Ryan obsessively, possessively, but with a quiet curiosity. Marco had been kind, patient, and gentle in a way that felt both familiar and new. He wasn't pushing, wasn't expecting anything from her. He simply enjoyed being with her. But Camilla wasn't sure if she was ready for that. Not yet. It was Friday evening, and she had just wrapped up a particularly exhilarating dance class when her phone buzzed. It was a message from Marco. "Marco, hey, I was thinking..." Maybe we could grab a drink this weekend? Nothing formal, just a casual hangout. Camila stared at the message for a few moments, her thumb hovering over the screen. She wasn't sure what to do. She had enjoyed their conversation, but was she really ready to open up to someone again? Was she ready for a relationship, any relationship, even one that felt simple and easy? She took a deep breath. She wasn't the same woman she had been when Ryan controlled every aspect of her life. She had changed, she had grown, and she deserved this. She deserved happiness. Her fingers moved quickly over the screen. Camila, that sounds great. I'd love to. As she sent the message, a sense of relief washed over her. She wasn't just saying yes to Marco. She was saying yes to herself. The next evening, Camila met Marco at a small, cozy bar downtown. The place was low lit, with soft jazz music playing in the background. Marco was already there, sitting at a corner table, his smile bright when he saw her. They ordered drinks, and as the conversation flowed, Camila found herself more and more at ease. She hadn't realized how much she had missed genuine connection, the kind of connection where there was no manipulation, no hidden agendas, just two people enjoying each other's company. Marco wasn't perfect. He had his own baggage, his own struggles, but he was real, and he listened. And most importantly, he treated her like an equal. It was refreshing. As the night wore on, Camila realized something that had been growing inside her since the moment she walked into that dance studio. She was beginning to trust herself again. Marco didn't make her feel small. He made her feel seen, respected. The following days were filled with more conversations, more laughter, and more moments of connection. With Marco, Camila didn't feel rushed. She didn't feel like she had to explain everything or justify herself. He simply accepted her. But even with all the progress, there was one thing still lingering in her mind: Ryan. She had been so focused on rebuilding herself that she hadn't given much thought to the possibility of him trying to find her. Had he? Did he even care? The thought gnawed at her. But then, one afternoon, as she was leaving her apartment, she saw something on the ground. It was an envelope. Her name was scrawled across the front in familiar handwriting. Camila's stomach turned. For a moment she just stood there, staring at the envelope. Part of her wanted to ignore it, to pretend she hadn't seen it, to keep moving forward without ever looking back. But another part of her, a part she had worked so hard to silence, wanted to know. She bent down and picked up the envelope. She opened it slowly, her hands trembling. Inside was a single letter. Ryan, I've been thinking about us, about everything. I know things got out of hand, but I want you back. You belong with me. I can fix it, Camila. We can fix it. You just have to give me another chance. Her breath caught in her throat. She closed her eyes for a moment, holding the letter tightly in her hands. This was it, the moment she had been avoiding. Was she really going to let Ryan back into her life? Would she risk everything she had fought for to go back to him? Or was she strong enough to leave him in the past, where he belonged? Camila's hand trembled as she stared at Ryan's letter. The familiar handwriting, the words, they pulled at her, reminding her of everything she had tried to forget. For a moment she wondered if she had made the right decision, if maybe she had been too quick to move on. But then she thought about everything she had fought for: the late-night dance classes, the long walks with Lisa, the courage it took to face the world again after years of silence and isolation. She had come so far. She wasn't going to let Ryan or his manipulations destroy that. With a deep breath, Camilla folded the letter in half and shoved it into her bag, walking away from it. She didn't need to read any more. When she arrived home, she took a few minutes to breathe, letting the weight of the letter settle in her chest before she took out her phone and sent a message to Marco. "Camilla, I need to talk. Can we meet later?" It didn't take long for Marco to reply. "Marco, of course, Camilla. I'll be there soon." The cafe where they met was quieter than usual, the sun casting soft shadows on the tables outside. Marco was waiting for her when she arrived, his smile warm but tinged with concern when he saw the look on her face. "What's going on?" Camilla sat across from him, feeling the weight of everything pressing on her chest. She had no idea how to start. "I got a letter today from my ex." Marco didn't ask for details, just nodded in understanding. "That's a lot to deal with." Camilla smiled faintly, appreciating his simplicity. He wasn't pushing her, wasn't looking for answers that weren't ready to be given. "I don't even know why I'm telling you this. I guess I don't want to go back. I don't want to go back to that place. But I don't know what to do with all of it, you know?" Marco leaned in slightly, his voice soft. "Camilla, you don't have to do anything you're not ready for. And you don't have to deal with this alone. Whatever happens, you have a choice. You don't owe him anything." Her throat tightened as she looked at him. The reassurance in his words was like a balm, soothing the raw nerves that had been exposed by the letter. I know that, but it still hurts. It still feels like I'm not really free." Marco reached across the table, his hand resting gently over hers. "You are. You're stronger than you think. You've already come so far." For the first time in a long while, Camilla believed him. She didn't have to face this pain alone. She had people who cared for her, who wanted the best for her, and she didn't need to let Ryan back into her life to find that. The next few days passed in a blur of movement. Camilla took a step back from everything that had happened, Ryan's letter, the emotions it stirred in her, the uncertainty, and focused on what was in front of her, the life she was building. She continued with her dance classes, finding more joy in them with each passing day. She spent time with Lisa, who had become her rock, her reminder that not all relationships were toxic, that not all people were out to manipulate. And of course there was Marco. As their friendship grew, so did the ease between them. They spent time together in simple ways, walking through the city, enjoying meals at small cafes, talking about anything and everything. The more she got to know him, the more she realized how different he was from Ryan. Marco never tried to control her. He didn't demand anything from her. All he wanted was to be there, to support her. It was a week later when Camilla ran into Ryan again. It wasn't expected. She had been walking through the park near her apartment when she saw him. He was sitting on a bench, staring at the ground, looking smaller than she remembered. For a moment, time seemed to stand still as their eyes met. Camilla's heart pounded, but this time there was no fear. There was no feeling of being trapped. There was just distance. Ryan stood when he saw her, taking a step toward her. "Camilla, please, can we talk?" For a moment she felt a wave of nostalgia, the old emotional pull that had once made her feel so weak. But she didn't let it take over. "No, Ryan, we don't need to talk. I'm done." His eyes flickered with something, perhaps shock, perhaps anger, but she didn't care. She had made her decision, and she wasn't going to let him control her anymore. You don't know what you're throwing away. I know exactly what I'm throwing away. I'm throwing away the pain, the manipulation, the lies. I'm throwing away a life that wasn't mine. For the first time in a long time, Camilla felt calm. She wasn't afraid of him anymore. She wasn't afraid of losing him. Goodbye, Ryan. And with that, she turned and walked away, leaving him standing in the park, alone. Camilla's heart pounded as she walked away from Ryan, but it wasn't the old, paralyzing fear that had once gripped her. This time it was strength. It was the feeling of taking back control, of standing tall after so many years of being dragged down by someone else's manipulation. She didn't look back. She didn't need to. The days that followed were quieter, but in a way that felt like a long-awaited breath. Camilla threw herself into her routines, finding peace in the simple things that had once seemed so difficult. She had never known how much she had missed the joy of small victories, finishing her dance class with a smile, cooking herself a comforting dinner, walking through the city without the weight of her past pulling her down. But as much as she immersed herself in her daily life, there were still moments when the emptiness crept in. It wasn't the kind of emptiness that made her feel lost or incomplete. It was a silence, a stillness that reminded her that there was room for more. Marco was a part of that more. He had become someone she could trust, someone who respected her boundaries without question. They hadn't labeled what they had, and she wasn't sure she was ready for labels. But they had something real, something comfortable, something safe. One evening, as she sat at a cafe with Marco enjoying a quiet dinner, he looked at her in a way that made her stomach flutter. She had gotten so used to feeling like she had to fight for affection, for respect, that the gentleness of Marco's presence sometimes threw her off balance. I know we haven't really talked about what's going on between us, but I just want to say that I care about you, Camilla, and I want to be here for you. Camilla's chest tightened, but this time it was different. It was a reminder that she didn't have to settle for less than she deserved. She didn't have to be afraid of opening her heart again. I care about you too, Marco, more than I thought I could. But I need to be honest with you, I'm still figuring things out. I'm still finding my way. Marco smiled softly, his hand reaching across the table to gently squeeze hers. I'm not going anywhere. Take all the time you need. His words were simple, but they were enough to remind her that love didn't need to be rushed or forced. It could grow slowly, like a seed planted in good soil. As the weeks went by, Camilla found herself leaning more and more into the life she was building. The quiet peace she had fought for was becoming her new normal. She wasn't rushing into anything, but there was a growing sense of trust, of possibility. One evening, Camilla found herself standing at her bedroom window, looking out at the city below. The world seemed so big, so full of opportunities she had once thought were out of reach. But now she felt like she was finally living her own life, one where she had a say in her choices, where she was no longer bound by the expectations of others. Her phone buzzed with a message from Marco. Marco, are you free this weekend? I was thinking we could spend some time together, just the two of us. A smile tugged at Camilla's lips. She hadn't realized just how much she had come to look forward to their time together. He was patient with her, understanding her needs without question. He didn't try to rush things. He simply was, she replied, feeling the warmth in her chest. Camilla, I'd like that. The weekend came quickly, and Marco arrived at her apartment with a surprise and afternoon picnic in the park. They spent hours talking, laughing, and enjoying the simplicity of the moment. There was no pressure, no need for anything more than the connection they shared. As they walked back through the city streets, Marco turned to her with a serious expression. Camilla, I want you to know something. She looked at him, her heart skipping a beat. You don't have to have all the answers right now. But if you ever want to explore more about us, about this, I'm here. Camilla's breath caught in her throat. She had never imagined she would be here, standing with someone who wanted to build something real, something stable, after everything she had been through. She had never imagined someone could love her without trying to break her. I'm not ready to rush into anything, but I think I'm ready to let myself explore what this could be, with you. Marco's eyes softened, and for the first time Camilla felt herself truly open up, not just to Marco, but to the possibility of a future where she could be loved without fear. Over the next few months, Camilla continued to rebuild her life, step by step. Her self-worth was no longer tied to someone else's opinion of her. She had learned to trust herself again. She knew she had value beyond her past, beyond her scars. Marco became her constant, but she didn't cling to him out of desperation. She clung to him because he had earned her trust, because he made her feel safe, respected, and valued. Their relationship was slow, but steady, built on respect and mutual care. They talked about everything, shared their fears, and learned about each other's dreams. Camilla was finally in a place where she could see love for what it was supposed to be. A partnership, a connection, not a battle for control or approval. As they sat on a bench overlooking the skyline one evening, Marco turned to her with a soft smile. You know, Camilla, I've never met anyone quite like you. She laughed softly, her heart full. I think I'm starting to understand that myself. For the first time in her life, Camilla didn't feel like she was settling. She wasn't accepting anything less than what she deserved. She was finally living the life she had fought for, a life of respect, love, and happiness. And as she sat there with Marco by her side, she realized that she had found not just love, but herself. The months passed, and life began to settle into a rhythm that Camilla had never known before. She woke up each morning with a sense of purpose, of possibility. The emotional scars from her past relationship were still there, lingering beneath the surface like faint shadows, but they no longer controlled her. She was no longer the woman who doubted her worth, who clung to unhealthy attachments in fear of being alone. Camilla was, for the first time in years, free. Her relationship with Marco continued to grow stronger, built on the foundation of mutual respect and understanding. But it wasn't just about Marco anymore. It was about Camilla, about the woman she was becoming. She had spent so many years caring for everyone else, trying to fix a love that had been broken from the start, that she had forgotten to care for herself. Now she was learning how to live for her own happiness, to take pride in the woman she had fought so hard to become. It was a process, sometimes a slow one, but every day she felt herself grow more confident, more at peace with the person in the mirror. One evening, after a long day at work, Camilla came home to find a small bouquet of wildflowers on her doorstep. They weren't fancy or expensive, but the simple gesture filled her with warmth. Marco's handwriting was on the attached note. "You're amazing, Camila. Never forget that." Her heart swelled. The sweetness of the gesture wasn't lost on her. It was just another example of the love and care Marco had brought into her life. He didn't try to overwhelm her or push her into anything. He simply loved her, without conditions or expectations, and for the first time she was allowing herself to receive that love. It was around this time that Camila began to think about her future more seriously. For so long, she had been stuck in survival mode, focused on getting through each day. But now she could finally imagine a future where she was happy, secure and free from the emotional turmoil that had once ruled her life. One evening she and Marco sat in their favorite cafe, sipping coffee and talking about their dreams. "I've been thinking about something, Camila." She looked up from her cup, curious. "What is it?" Marco hesitated, then spoke softly. "What would you think about moving in together? I don't want to rush you, but I think it could be something beautiful." Camila's breath caught for a moment. Moving in together? It was a big step, one that she hadn't considered until now. She thought about her past, the toxic relationship that had once consumed her. The thought of cohabitation, of sharing space with someone, used to scare her. But now, sitting across from Marco, she didn't feel fear. She felt trust. I think I'd like that." "I'm ready, Marco. I trust you." Marco's face lit up, and in that moment Camila realized that she was no longer afraid of taking the next step. She had spent so long living in fear of change, of making decisions that would once again lead to pain. But this was different. This time she was choosing for herself, choosing a life of love, not just for Marco, but for herself. Weeks later they moved in together. It wasn't a grand, dramatic change. It was a quiet transition that felt natural, comfortable. Camila had her own space, her books, her plants, the things that made her feel at home. She wasn't giving up her independence. She was simply sharing her life with someone who respected her boundaries, someone who saw her as an equal, not as someone to control. Their home became a sanctuary, a place where they could be themselves, where Camila could finally breathe without fear of judgment or manipulation. She spent her evenings cooking dinner, listening to music, and laughing with Marco. She spent her weekends doing things that made her happy, painting, hiking, and taking time for herself. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, she began to realize something even more profound. She had found peace, real, lasting peace. She no longer needed to fight for validation, for love, for respect. She had everything she needed within herself. It was a year after their move-in that Camila stood in front of the mirror, looking at the woman who had come so far. She hardly recognized herself. The woman staring back at her wasn't the same person who had been trapped in an abusive relationship, constantly second-guessing her worth. She was stronger now, more confident. She had rebuilt her life piece by piece, and in doing so, had rediscovered who she truly was. She wasn't perfect, and she didn't have all the answers, but she had learned that happiness didn't come from other people's approval. It came from within, and she had found someone who respected that, who loved her for who she was, not for who he wanted her to be. As she turned to Marco, who was standing in the doorway with a warm smile, she knew that whatever the future held, she was ready for it. She had come through the darkness, and now she was living in the light. She was finally free,